So let's dive in. Welcome everybody. What we're going to do today, I've got James Harbour here, who has you can see a little just down there somewhere, a little head. There we are. We've both been using chatbots to pre-qualify clients for portrait customers, for portrait promotions. Just going to click here to stop that from flicking back and forth. Well, what we found is that really, no matter how automated your portrait booking process is, there needs to be a phone call at some point. So this webinar, as much as I love chatbots, this webinar is not at all about chatbots. Everything that we talk about, you can do in other ways. Just for context, though, it's worth you knowing that our process, they're different, but they're both very similar. So we start off on a bot, and then we finish the job on a phone call. There was any of you who are PhotoBizX listeners, you might have heard an episode last week which went into this topic in a lot of detail, and it was a bit, for me, honestly, it was a bit hard to hear that someone had gone through. So James White, if you're watching, doing awesome work, by the way, and thanks for sharing that. But it was a bit hard to hear that the process had worked so well, and then on the phone it fell over. And so James Harbour, my guest today, and myself both had the same thought at the same time, really, that we need to get some of this information out there and helping people. So that's preamble done. I want to just pass over to James to say hi, introduce himself, and let you know what he's up to, and what he'll be, the perspective he'll be coming at this from.
Cool. Thanks, Ian. So I'm James. I'm originally from the UK, but I moved to Australia 4 years ago. I work in Canberra, basically, which is the capital of Australia, if you're not from Australia. Basically, I do portrait engagement and wedding photography. I primarily work with couples and engaged couples as well. I do a little bit of family stuff, but it's not what I mainly do, but I also do weddings as well. So my big focus is on couples, basically, and this includes couples who aren't getting engaged as well, per se. And as kind of Ian was saying, I've done these kind of model calls now for a while. And in the last few times I've used the chat bot, and that's been absolutely fantastic. And one of the hard things I found when I started was phone calls, because I think as photographers, we're great. The technical stuff, getting the chat bot all done and dusted, awesome. But when it comes to picking up the phone, and especially asking the harder questions, it can be a little bit tough. And one of the things I suffered with was being very honest with people who applied for these model call sessions and saying, it will cost this much. What are you really like really trying to drill down instead of just saying, yeah, well, okay, I need the work, so I'm going to say yes, and hopefully you'll buy something later. I kind of worked more and more to kind of really be a lot more hardball, and this has really helped me. And I think this is what Ian and I are going to share with you guys today to kind of help you understand what questions to ask and why to ask them. To kind of really, at the end of the day, get clients who are probably going to invest more, and they're going to be a better quality client because they're going to be more drawn to you, and they're going to be more invested in the whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. So both of us are going to be referring vaguely throughout this webinar to model call promos and Facebook ad promos. Really, the focus is going to be on the phone and on the questions and the phrases that we use on all portrait booking phone calls. The context comes from any promotion that where you're giving away a free portrait session, whether that's a family session, whether it's an engagement session, it could be dogs or whatever it is. But the way we've actually been using this in our own studios is really on the back of a model call type promo, or going back to that PhotoBizX group, because I think there's quite a few of you on here, the Bernie style ads. So with that said, I'm gonna crack into a little bit of a presentation that we've put together, just a couple of slides to guide us through. What we've put together is a set of all of the questions, the key questions and phrases that we use on every phone call, and we're going to just take it in turns and talk you through some of these questions and phrases. Now, hopefully, we'll have. Just give me one sec. All right, cool. So I can see happier messages coming through, by the way. Whenever the camera is on me, or you can see me in the bottom corner, you'll see me looking at my phone a lot. I'm not texting friends. I am texting friends, but they're friends who are on this call. The chat is all based on Messenger for this webinar, and so it's coming through to my phone so that we can keep up to date with any questions that you've got for us. So let's crack in. First up, I guess it's worth just taking a moment to reiterate why it's so important to nail these phone calls. And really, as James said before, it's tempting as a photographer to focus on the shoot, and sometimes for I guess for some of us, the technical stuff, the automation of the appointment booking and all of that sort of stuff. Those two things can really distract us from what we're really doing is building a human to human relationship with a customer, and that starts really on the phone. Again, it might sound strange for someone who talks about chatbots all the time to talk about it's to dismiss them in that way. I think a chatbot can do a whole lot of work, but in fact, that's my first point. Chatbots have limitations. There are things that people will tell a human on the phone that they just will not tell a chatbot in Messenger. And we'll get into some of those in the questions and phrases. Some people just lie. Let's be honest. So if you're faced with a couple of questions in a questionnaire or in a chatbot in response to a promotion, you could just choose the option that you think the photographer wants to hear to get your free shoot. And on the phone, we can dig into those things a little bit more. We can ask the right follow-up questions, and we can identify whether it is a lie or not. Usually, some people slip through the cracks, right? So reducing $0 sales, James and I were just talking about this before the call, and he was telling me about how for a portrait session you can end up spending about 10 hours with that client. Everyone's different, but I'm probably around the same. And really, we don't want to be doing that for $0 and an awkward shoot and an awkward sales session. There's times where you can choose to give away your time, but the last thing I would want to be doing, or the last thing I'd want you to be doing, is to give it away accidentally. And that's the problem that prompted this whole webinar. We both saw that people are running promotions, getting people in on free shoots, and not having the right conversation on the phone to be able to choose whether to give away their time for free or not. You might make a different decision about how often you give away your time. You might choose to go really hardball and never do it. You might choose to run a charity and give away free sessions all the time. But it should be your choice. And this phone call approach will help you be in control of that choice. Increasing sales averages, there's two ways that this happens. The first way is we're going to be talking on the phone calls, we're going to be talking about products and walls and prices, and we're going to start introducing some of those things to our potential client, so that they're starting to prepare for a potential sale down the road. We're also going to be identifying people who will take up exactly the same amount of time, but there is no chance that they'll ever buy anything. And so the average, if the best sales go up and the worst sales disappear, your average is going to rise. So if we do end up doing a shoot that has had no conversation about pricing beforehand, if we've kind of chickened out on the phone, and I've done that myself before, I'm sure all of us have, then you end up in a sales meeting afterwards, or sending a gallery off to somebody to choose their favorites. They see the prices there. They're going to see them at some point. And it's not a nice experience for them. It's also not a nice experience for you when you get that email or you get that in-person comment that's something along the lines of, wow, I can't believe you're so expensive. It's just better for everybody. In fact, I think that's the next point. It's better for everybody if we just avoid that awkwardness for everybody by kind of hitting it up front and being open and honest and just having a conversation about it. So to put it another way, rip the Band-Aid off. This whole slide deck was very light on graphics, so we needed something. All right, so just before we crack in, the way this is going to work, James is going to have a chat about a question or a phrase that he uses regularly with his clients. Then I'll have a chat about one that I use, and we'll just go back and forth. There's a little bit of a theme to them. You'll notice as we go, and then at the end of that, we're going to talk about. So I think there's 10 or 11 of those. At the end of that, we're going to talk about how you can, rather than just trying to fit James's best questions and his best phrases and my best questions and my best phrases into one phone call, because you're going to end up on the phone for about 2 hours if you do that. Rather than doing that, we'll help you structure your own phone script. So there's a little bit of a sequence that can help you stay in control, and I'll talk you through that at the end. And then we'll have Q&A where you can just pummel us with questions. In fact, you're welcome to send them through on Messenger now. So I've just had a question from Lisa. Will we get a copy of the slides, or should we take notes? It's probably a good idea to take notes. I'll send you a replay of the webinar as well. The reason why, I'm happy to send you the slide deck. The problem is that some of the slides, you'll see they've got kind of an introduction to the question or the phrase, but they won't go through all the detail. And so I think the video replay is going to be more useful to you. But send me a message afterwards. I'm happy to send you the slides. I'll just do a quick check, see whether we've got any other questions. All right, cool. It's pretty hard to see the questions at the moment just because we've got people joining. and so if you've sent a question, it may have gotten lost in amongst the people saying hi and reminders about the start time. So if you don't get an answer, just ask me later and we'll get into it. All right. Without further ado, James, over to you, man.
Cool. Thanks, Ian. So one of the big things I always ask is, I say this kind of pretty early on, maybe the third or fourth question I think I asked them, I say, have you managed to look at the website yet? Or have you seen any images of mine that you're particularly drawn to? Now, the reason why I ask that is because when they book in for me after the chatbot sequence, it says, hey, you can book in here for a time. I use Calendly. And then after that, it sends them a link once they've booked in saying, have a look at the website, read about the experience. Now, I've got an experience page on my website there, which goes over the whole process. And most importantly, right at the end there, it does talk about the investment, the typical investment per couple, kind of the starting price for products and stuff like that. And the whole thing I ask, have you looked at the website yet? One, it's kind of a thing of saying, are you kind of doing what I'm telling you? Are you kind of bothered to have a look. And also the big thing is it's starting to get them prepped for the fact that it's not going to be $100 photo shoot with 200 images included. It is a really premium and boutique experience. It's awesome, and I want them to get kind of really hyped up for that. I really want them to kind of think, wow, this is the real deal. This is amazing. Oh, I can see that, if we want to invest, it's probably going to be around this much. That's fine. So even before we've had the phone call, they're kind of getting an idea of what the lay of the land is. And the second part of that is I say, have you seen any images of mine that you're particularly drawn to? Now, everyone I work with, at least, I want them to be 200% enthusiastic about what I'm doing. And if I kind of ring them up and they say, oh, no, not really, actually, it kind of says to me, well, how do you know I'm going to be the right style for you? Because they might be thinking, free photo shoot, great. It's going to be posed in a park, great. And for me, at least, I don't pose people, and I don't go to the park down the road. I'm typically going to like beaches and forests and stuff like that. And obviously, I want to make sure we're a good match right from the start. And it's yet again that kind of thing of really trying to assess, why do you care about me? Do you actually care about what I'm doing and what kind of stuff I create? Because if you don't, we're probably not going to be a good fit. Because, if I'm going to give this away for free, I want you to be so enthusiastic, because the whole thing is that if they're enthusiastic and they love what I do, when it comes to seeing the final images, they're going to be like, wow, we want them all. What can we do? I love every single one. And as Ian said, that's going to be an increase in average of sales, because, more enthusiastic people are, the more likely they are to invest about stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an awesome question. I think a super blunt way of saying the same thing, which I would never say, but it's basically you're saying, have you looked at the prices? Have you bothered to click on the link? and did you feel anything at all when you saw them? So those three questions, have you seen the images, and are there any that you're particularly drawn to? Those things tell you so much about how much they're going to value the shoot and value the images afterwards.
That's it.
Awesome question. So this is a bit similar. What made you click on our post? What would you like to get out of this? Now, we've asked a similar question in the bot before we get to the phone call. But when we get to the phone call, I generally start it with a little bit of a chat, a little bit of, as my son would call it, grown-up chitter-chatter. Just asking about their relationship and some of that kind of stuff. I'll then explain why we're running the project that they chose to get involved with. So why that ad has happened, why we're offering free shoots at all, and I'll talk in there about wanting to kind of explore new things, and that's genuinely one of the reasons why we do Facebook ad promos, to be able to meet couples who are kind of up for anything. At the end of that, I'm really keen to know what they want to get out of this. I think it's kind of a nice thing it shows some care to start with, to say, I genuinely want to know what you want from this, but also it gives us some potentially awesome answers and potentially terrible answers. So potentially terrible would be, it's free, I have nothing else on, I'm unemployed at the moment, so I've got time to burn. A great answer would be something like, either I'm just recently engaged and so excited about this stage that we're at, I just want to capture it. Or we've just renovated our house, we've moved the family to this new place, but the walls are blank. This seems like a great opportunity to fill them. And it starts a conversation. And that's the aim with all of these questions, by the way, is not to dictate exactly what gets said on every call. We're not trying to turn a phone call into a chatbot, but we want to prompt conversations.
Awesome, cool. So another thing I ask is, why do photos matter so much to you at this point in time? And as Ian's mentioned, it's really about getting that conversation and really trying to develop that kind of semantic connection in the head as to kind of why they want to do this. If they're saying, I don't know really, maybe they don't matter at all, they're not going to be a good fit. You want people, it's about kind of really developing that thought for them and to kind of let them think more and more about why photos matter so much to themselves. And when you say that, people are probably going to say, oh, they matter so much to me because of our 50th year anniversary or 10th year anniversary. And they're actually selling themselves at that point. They're kind of saying, I know photos are important to me because of X, Y, and Z. And it's great for themselves to kind of obviously, tell themselves why they want these photos. And also it can kind of help if it's just the overall kind of process of having them think this is an important thing. This isn't like, it's a free photo shoot, one print out the door. It's saying, why do you care? Why? And it's like what Ian has just said previously. It's kind of saying, why do you care about coming to have photos? Why would you bother trying to spend, a 2-hour portrait session with me, an hour's design appointment, an hour's cinematic reveal? Why do you want to spend 4 or 5 hours of your life dedicated to this? Why does it matter? And that's what it's really getting to the heart of. And I find that whenever I ask this question, it kind of it reveals a lot about themselves as well. And it's like Ian said, they could say, well, we've got this new house. And immediately in your brain, you're kind of thinking, good, okay, this sounds like a good fit, which is awesome. And I think the underlying thing as well, like what Ian said, kind of it shows you care as well. And kind of there's that classic saying, like, people don't care unless I'm probably paraphrasing it, but it's the whole thing. If you care, people are going to care about what you're doing. People want to know that you actually care. And even a simple question like this, it's trying to say, like, I want to understand you. Like, why are you here now? Why are you here with me? You could go to any old photographer. Why is it?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I love about this question and the other one, as the previous one as well, sort of does a similar thing in that it loads the person up with things that they can use in their pitch to their partner as well. So when you ask a bride, why do photos matter to you so much to you at this point in time, and she starts to have a really a really good think about it, she's going to come up with some lines that she can use on her fiance when she gets off the phone from you as well, or a mum to her partner, or a dad to whatever. Just starts that conversation off well. And sometimes we should acknowledge that sometimes they're heading into a hard conversation. They're telling us that their fiance is keen, and then they're going to work on them. So this all helps. So I was waiting for you to start talking, James. So, when was the last time you were photographed professionally together, and how did that go? So I want to hear, really this question is about sorting out Facebook freebie hunters from the rest of the population. There's a group of people that do shoots several times a year. They spot things that are free and they just jump in, and they don't value their time enough to think maybe it's not worth getting the whole family dressed up and heading down there and doing the design appointment and all that stuff just for one print. They don't mind doing that. They're happy to sign up for it. I'd like to know that that's what I'm going into, if that's what I'm choosing to go into. So this question really helps with that. It can also tell you things like we've had kids for, my oldest kid is 10 years old, and the last time we had professional photos was when she was 6 weeks old. We've been meaning to do it for years and years and years, but we've never had an opportunity, or it's never gotten to the top of the to-do list. And this project popped up on Facebook, and it looked like a great excuse to do it, and so I'm jumping on it. But those sorts of things, when you hear those, that's gold.
Yeah, that's very, very true. That it's it's always nice to hear. Kind of, it's always good to get an impression of kind of if people have worked with photographers before, and especially I love that thingy of kind of saying, they're 6 weeks old, now they're 10 years old. We need to get them updated. It really kind of puts that weight behind why they actually want to have the session, which is awesome.
And it means that this one's got to count, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So another thing I say as well is tell me a little bit about yourselves and, a little bit about your lives as well. At least for me, I'm pretty sure we all kind of really want to work with the right people at the end of the day. I feel we all have a client type. Like my type of person is probably going to be the person who's very chatty, very enthusiastic, like, you know, isn't afraid to make a joke and stuff like that. I'm sure that like a lot of people's type is like that. But, you know, when I say this, tell me a little bit about yourselves and about your life, it really kind of flushes out a little bit more about what they're like, you know. So, for example, like if I have someone, I say, tell me a little bit about yourselves and your life. And if I get kind of 1 or 2 word answers, to me, that kind of doesn't show that we're probably going to be a good match, because I'm going to be spending hours with you. And as you can tell, I'm quite a chatty bloke. You know, I like to be able to kind of really kind of parlay with people and have a good chat about stuff. And if someone's going to be 1 or 2 word answers, we're not really going to be a good fit. And also it just tells me, and also, yeah, again, it's just understanding them a little bit more. You know, if they come out and they're like, oh, you know, we love going skiing, we love doing this, we do woodwork on the weekends and stuff. In my brain, it's yet again thinking, oh, well, these guys sound like a good match for me, which is really cool. And I like that to kind of really flush out a bit more of an idea about themselves. And it also gets them more invested as well, because they're another big part of all these questions is then, you know, the more they tell you about their personal life, the more invested they are in kind of you, and they get an understanding, you know, they kind of really appreciate that you're here to learn about them and to kind of create the perfect session for them, which is going to reflect them, which is what everybody wants in photographs, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it starts off the relationship on a great note, doesn't it? So that when you're heading to the shoot, you're ready to photograph individuals rather than, you know, generic customers.
Yeah.
So assuming we end up with an amazing set of images, what would you ideally like to do with them? So guys and girls who are watching this, you might be sensing a bit of a theme that we're constantly trying to bring the conversation back to the end product and trying to make it really clear that the end product isn't the shoot. And that's kind of a bit of a theme in everything that we've talked about so far. This question here on my phone calls, it might actually never happen because we've talked about organically the conversation has covered this earlier on, perhaps. So I don't want you to get the impression that if there's 6 questions in here about products and prices, I hit them all, even if we've already had the conversation, that would lead to a really, really annoying phone call. But some of these ones towards the tail end of this presentation, tail end of this webinar, are going to be catch-alls, just things that you can use to make sure that if, for example, we asked earlier about what would you like to get out of this portrait session, and there was just no talk about walls or products or anything like that, and they've headed down a really interesting path, and you just wanted to follow the conversation there, this is a good way of catching up to it later on, just to make certain that products and prices come up. Ideally is an important word here. I think I don't want people to feel that on this phone call they need to commit to anything at all. That seems to me a bit unfair, to be honest, to say we haven't taken a single picture yet. You don't know really whether we're going to get any decent pictures. I'm confident of it, but you have no reason to be. You know, as the customer going into this, you have no reason to be confident that you're going to get amazing images of yourself and your family. So committing to something beforehand seems a little bit premature. But what would you ideally like to do with them is an easier question to answer.
Absolutely. I think that's really good. I think, you know, I definitely agree with that. I think no matter kind of which way you ever present pricing, you never want to be that, you know, you don't want to be that bully on the phone kind of saying, you know, it's that kind of fine line between giving them options, saying, hey, well, you know, we could do this, but, you know, there's no obligation for you to, you know, unless you really love what you see finally. And yeah, that's totally right. It's good to plant ideas in their heads. But yeah, again, as Ian says, you don't want to be that person who's like, you know, so is it going to be a 30 by 40 or is it going to be a box of prints, or what's it going to be? Yeah. Cool. And this is, yeah, again, Ian's right. There's definitely a theme here. And it's definitely about kind of really trying to get them to visualize what they want as an end, as kind of the end result out of everything. And one thing I say is, you know, on the ManyBot questionnaire, they'll say, you know, whereabouts are you looking for a thing in the home? And they might click lounge, for example, and I'll look at it while I'm talking to them and say, oh, I can see you want to get a piece of the lounge. That's awesome. So whereabouts in the lounge are you thinking about getting something? And yet again, what I then get is it gives me an indication yet again of kind of themselves. So for example, you know, if they go in and say, oh, well, we've got this couch over here. We've been dying to get like a panoramic piece above it, or, oh, I think we'd love to get something next to this kind of cabinet we've got. That's a good indication, because yet again, they're thinking, you know, when they come in, they're like, oh, well, I know I said to you I want something above there. We're definitely going to think about that in the end. So even before kind of we've taken any photos, they're already thinking we want to get something above there, basically. It's yet again prepping them and priming them that it's not going to be one complimentary print and out the door you go. You know, and yet again, kind of it gives you a good indication as well, because if somebody kind of says, and yet again, it might be different for people if they're investing in digital negatives. If you're trying to get them to invest in digital negatives, it might be a different thing. But for me, you know, if they give me that specific wording, I think awesome. If they say, well, we've actually got a bit of a small place and we don't really have a lot of wall space, I'm kind of thinking, well, really, they're not really going to get a lot from experience of coming in here and seeing all these big art pieces for them to invest in, and they've only got maybe one very small wall. And, you know, it's not a good fit, and it's better that they're not fitted with us and that we go through the whole process, and, you know, they're not going to get the most out of the whole experience. Or another thing people say again is, oh, we live with our parents, so we don't really have any wall space at the moment. Yet again, for me, what I do is I do specialize in wall art and stuff and products. And obviously, if you've got someone that says that, it's probably not going to be a good result to get the most out of you. If you're getting into invest in digital negatives, maybe this isn't kind of so relevant. But yeah, again, you could say, when you get your digital negatives, what are you gonna do with them? You know, do you have anything in mind with that? It's yet again getting them to that end goal and thinking, you know, what are you going to do once you get these images? You're not just going to have them on a USB and put the back of the drawer.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And these questions, it's worth just highlighting that both of us are coming from an IPS perspective, but really this one, for example, if somebody's planning to buy a digital image and hang it on their lounge room wall, and their lounge room wall is, let's say, red brick, and you're starting to plan a portrait session against a red brick wall somewhere else, you're setting them up for a pretty strange looking thing on their wall. So it's helpful for the sale, but it's still really useful information to have for the shoot as well. So I think I was saying to James before, I think this might be a phrase that I've just directly borrowed from somebody. I think I know who it is, but if you're on the call and it's yours, please send me a message. I'd love to know. I feel like I've been saying it for a few years now, and I've forgotten how to you know, where the source is, so I can give people the right credit. But you'll probably only ever do this once. So that's for an engagement session, or you probably won't do this again for at least a few years for a family session. So it's worth doing right. So comes back to the comment we had earlier. I have a lot of phone calls where people say things early on in the phone call, like, I haven't had a portrait session with my family for 6 years. And then when we get up to this point, I can refer back to that and say, you know, you probably won't do this again for at least a few years. I mean, you know how long it's taken you this time. So it's worth doing it right. And it gives you the permission to ask them more questions than maybe they're expecting to be asked, to dig a bit deeper into their relationships than maybe they're expecting you to dig, to give more advice about clothes and location and things like that than maybe they were expecting, and also to spend more time focusing on designing things for their home. It highlights the importance of all of that. And I've found this to be a really useful, it's not so much a question, it's a phrase that I'm guessing I would say it to 95% of the people that end up in front of my camera.
Awesome, fantastic. So another thing I say as well is kind of what are your hopes and dreams for the session with me? Yet again, another one of those questions. I think I asked this right after kind of why a photo is so important to yourself. By kind of really, again, it's one of those questions to really kind of understand what they want out of it. Because if they say, oh, we just want the free print, that'll be fine. That's obviously a bit of a red flag. Whereas, if they say, look, we've always wanted, like Ian's just said, we've always wanted photos. What we want is we really want to kind of have a nice art piece for the wall, or we want to have a really, really fun experience, something really, really cool. Those are kind of good indicators for me. And it kind of is, yet again, kind of really, understanding that what they're here for. They're not just saying, oh, well, random competition, nothing better to do, might as well do it anyway. Why not? You want to kind of really get into that kind of understanding of why they care. It's another why do you care question.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one. So this is really the first one that I can think of anyway that's pretty specific to a free shoot. Most of the other questions that I've said so far and phrases that I've been describing, I would say to everybody, a lot of them come up in engagement shoots and family shoots, no matter what the source of the lead is. This one really works for free portrait sessions when you're giving away a session and a print. And the way it goes, something along the lines of, look, there's two ways that this can work. I can either, option one, I'll give you a free portrait session, a free print, and together we'll choose your favorite picture on the back of the camera. So we can choose your free print, and then I won't tempt you with anything else. Sometimes in life, it's just not good timing financially to be sitting in front of a screen full of beautiful pictures and not be able to afford all of them. I don't want to put you in an awkward situation. So that's option one. Option two, basically, I would just treat you like a normal client, as if you had Googled a family photographer in Melbourne and booked in a session, paid your session fee, and we start the normal plan. The difference would be that your session would be free, so you wouldn't pay that session fee. You'd get a free print as promised, and from there we would treat your shoot and your design session exactly like a normal client. So you'd have access to the full range of products. You would be able to get us to help you with designing things for your walls and all of that sort of stuff. Of those two options, which one feels more like you? Which one do you prefer? And if you're listening to this and thinking, well, of course, the second one, why would you spend the time going through the shoot, going through the decisions about what to wear, all of that kind of stuff, and not even want the opportunity to see the rest of the pictures and choose your favorites and design some things, then you're right. You're probably with 70% of the population there, but the other 30%, I find they do actually say, option one sounds good to me. We're just not in a position at the moment to be able to buy anything. I'd much prefer to not be tempted. And so that opens up a really helpful conversation where we can talk about really whether this is a good time in their life to be doing this or not. Maybe we should chat again in 6 months or a year or something like that, when they can really enjoy the whole experience and they can get the maximum out of it. But this is a sentence that I say to everybody, and I find it really, really useful. I think we're just about at the end of them.
Yeah. Cool. Another thing I ask is, how does your partner feel about the prospect of having this portrait session? This is basically to catch the fibbers, to catch the people, not necessarily, but in the sequence, like one thing you'd say, how does your partner feel about this? And I think I have three choices, like we're both keen, not sure, or not really. And obviously when people say we're both keen, this is done to make sure that it's not just the partner who's thinking, well, I think you'll be keen. I'll just say we'll be keen because I think it'll get us through. It's about what Ian said before about people sometimes just lie. And it's about kind of really saying, how does your partner feel about the prospects? And if they said, it's a bit of a surprise that actually I haven't told him, that to me is a little bit of a red flag, because I found that when, I'm sure you've had this, if you've got one partner who is keen but the other one isn't, the portrait sessions don't always go that well. Yet again, it's avoiding that awkwardness, really. It's very nice that one partner might be really into it, but if the other one isn't, it takes two to tango. And, it's really about kind of identifying, kind of saying, how does your partner feel? And if they're like, yeah, no, he's definitely keen, I've spoken to him about it. He saw me submit the application. It's awesome. I think, great. That's really good. And if she says, or he says, oh, it's a surprise for them. And then I might say something like, how do you think they're going to respond? And if they say, he'd do it for me, I know he'd do it for me, that again is like another red flag, because again, it's not going to work. And it's just basically just trying to drill down, because I found that when partners aren't on board, when it comes to seeing the final images again, and you've got the investment there, it's never going to be as high, because the one partner might be like, we want everything. And then he might be like, well, I don't actually care about this stuff that much. That's actually not. And it's that negative space you don't really want in the kind of final decision. And also kind of the whole experience. You want people who love your work and who are like so keen to work with you. You don't want to kind of drag the other one back by the tailcoat. So
Yeah, cool. For those of you watching this who are course members of mine or have been using chatbots in general in these types of promotions, one little tip that helps with this exact point. It's a great idea to ask the question on the phone, and I've told James before this call I'm absolutely going to be stealing this question. But between the time that somebody goes through your bot and books in a phone call and the time of the actual phone call, if that's at least got a night in it, and it's a couple or a family that are living together, then there's a very, very good chance that they're going to have a conversation about it between booking the call and having the call. And this question will help you work out whether that conversation has happened already or whether it's yet to happen, which really it could kill the shoot. If they haven't talked about it at all, your shoot could get cancelled. And Richard had a question before about booking fees. So Richard, if we don't get to it, please remind me when we get to the Q&A. But yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. All right. Have you had a chance to check out our pricing yet? Would it help if I give you a little summary? Now, I'm not going to talk about this one too much because it's pretty clear what I'm getting at here. A couple of little points to make about this. One is that you can see with the phrasing of that question, it's all about what can I do for you? It's not about can you please tell me what you like and how much you're going to spend so I can work out whether this is worth my time. It's not that. It's have you had a chance? Have you had time to check this out? And can I help by giving you a summary? It's worth keeping that approach in mind. If you're nervous at all about bringing up the money stuff when you're on the phone with clients, think about it from that perspective. Think about it as a service. As if you don't, you're really not doing the customers any favors. If you give them the opportunity to ask questions about pricing, you're just helping to ease a whole lot of anxiety for them throughout the whole process. Imagine going through a shoot not having any idea what you could be spending at the end of it. I personally would absolutely hate that idea. To drive out to the shoot, to go to even before that, get the kids dressed, thinking, am I spending $200 today? Am I spending $5,000 today? I have no idea. So hopefully that helps you kind of take the pressure out of that question. The second point I wanted to make about this is that it's another one that really, if the call has gone well, I don't end up saying this. If the call has gone really well and we've just gotten really chatty about their family or their relationship or whatever, then we might end up having to use this. But it's a catch-all at the end of the conversation, just to make absolutely certain that there's no way of getting off the phone without having had every opportunity to talk about prices. so that it can be nice and clear for everybody.
Yeah, I totally, utterly echo that, to be honest. I think one of the things, and I think it's, again, I think it might be something I see a lot of people have a hard time with is approaching this whole pricing thing. And I think some people might be a bit afraid sometimes to tell people maybe what the average spend per client is, but it's something you've got to do. Because it's like Ian says, if you had a whole experience and then at the end of it, you have the best time ever, and then you come in here and it's like, oh, well, actually all the images are going to cost you, $900, and you weren't expecting that. You're going to be like, immediately it's going to get awkward, and it's just going to leave a terrible sour taste in everyone's mouth. And I think this is another thing when you do hear these stories where, and I had it in the recent call I did, where a woman actually said, I did one of these calls up in Perth or something. I've just moved to Canberra. Is it anything like this where we're going to be told right at the end the price? And I thought that's terrible, because that's probably what's happened here, where people haven't addressed it. And this is what gives people this kind of bad thing when you see it in the group, when people say, well, I put this ad up and I had this person complain on there that they've done this before and they've been tricked. And that's the biggest problem ever that can happen with these Bernie ads. Like, you've got to tell people, you've got to be prepared to say it will cost you this much. This is an idea. If you haven't looked at pricing, let me tell you a little bit about it, because otherwise that is the problem which causes the biggest problem ever in these adverts. You've got to tell people.
It's only fair to the client, isn't it? And also, it's a bit of protection for your reputation as well. You don't want that stigma getting out there that you sting people at the end.
No.
I've had people complain to me about another studio, about the big surprise fee at the end. I've been open about our prices. They've ended up spending more with us than they did last time anyway, but they were happy about it. It's not about the number, I guess, is my point. It's more about, were you honest throughout the process, and was it their decision, or did they feel out of control?
Absolutely, yeah, 200%, Ian. Yeah, it's vital.
Can I just pause us there for a sec, James? I'd love to know from anybody listening if you'd like us to go into this topic in a little bit more detail, or to move on. So in terms of when somebody says, yes, I would like a little summary, would you like us to talk about how that conversation goes, or should we just move on to the next question? If I'm going to base that decision on the first person to answer. If we don't get an answer in the next sort of 20 seconds, we'll just move on anyway. Feel free to, if we don't talk about it here, feel free to send us a message. I'm happy to have a chat with you about it over Messenger. So we've got more detail. Looks like it's winning so far. Yep. Okay, cool. So I might, if you're comfortable talking about it, James, we don't talk about actual numbers if you don't want to.
Yeah, sure.
When somebody says, can you please tell me a bit about the pricing? And it's the first interaction you've had with them. They've applied for a free shoot, and part of the selection process is this phone call. How does that answer go?
Cool. Okay. Well, what I'll do is I'll give you I'll tell you exactly what I say to people to give you a really good idea. So what I would say is that the lead up question I usually say is, I can tell you a little bit more about the competition and also the investment for smart pieces as well. And they'll say, yep, we'd love to. So I'd say, awesome. So the really cool thing about the whole competition and everything with me is basically, at the end of the day, the really cool thing is you only have to invest in something unless you absolutely love it. So let me paint you a little bit of a picture here. So what we would do is we would go out, have your adventure session, your portrait session, have the best time ever. It would be a blast. You guys come back in here about 2 to 3 weeks later, and we have what I call your cinematic viewing and ordering appointment. Now, basically, I like to make this crystal clear. At the end of the day, you can come in here, have the most awesome time with me. Basically, you can see the final 30 to 50 images, and you could say, James, do you know what, mate? We love that image of us out in the forest there. We'd love to have that as our complimentary print and call it a day. And I'll always say, awesome. As long as you guys are happy, I'm happy as well. And then again, basically, if you say, do you know what, James, we love all the photos. Do you know what, mate? We'd actually really love, I know we spoke before about getting an art piece above the couch. We'd love to get something like that. The cool thing is you'd have $200 towards any art pieces, and I'm even happy to design it for you. And what I'll do is I'll give you a bit of an idea about the investment of three main things people usually get with me. So the first are kind of your big signature pieces. So say, for example, you want to go nuclear, you want to get a big 30 by 40, something really, really big. Say, for example, then, the second thing people sometimes like to get are storyboard pieces. So, for example, you could get, three 16-inch by 16-inch kind of canvases all next to each other, all lined up, looking amazing. We could have a really cool picture of you guys in the middle, a really funny one on the right, and a bit more of a kind of an intimate one on the left. Loads of different options. Other people prefer to say, we actually want to get a collection of prints, or we'd love to get a fine art album. Now, I'm really interested, X, which one of those appeals more to you than the others? Now, what I do, yet again, my pricing structure is set up so that everything's kind of, those three investments are kind of the same investment. And what I'll do is this is me talking as well, not me talking to the client. But what I'll do is I'll give you an example of kind of the thing I'd say. So, for example, if they said, oh, well, we really like the idea of the kind of three pieces, that would be amazing. I'd say, awesome, fantastic. So, yeah, again, one of the more premium options here. But say, for example, you want to have these three 16 inches by 16 inches pieces, and the investment that would be $900. And that gives you a good idea of what clients like to invest, usually around $900 to $2,000 to have something really nice on the wall and something awesome on the coffee table. But the great news is you only have to invest unless you really honestly love your final images. And I'm also more than happy to do 3, 6, and 12-month payment plans as well. How does that sound? And what they'll then say at the end of that is they'll say, oh, that sounds great. Or they'll say, yeah, I think maybe like our budget might be a bit stretched at the moment, so I don't think we could really do that. In which case, what I would then do is I would kind of say, that's fine, awesome, no problem. But what I'm doing is I'm doing a final round of interviews at the moment. What I'll do is I'll call you shortly. If you're one of the winners, really, really exciting. Do you have any further questions? And that is basically what I say to people when they say, can you give me some more pricing information? What I do is I give them an example of kind of a thing which people usually get with me. And then I tell them the average investment per client. So at the end of the day, it also helps set them up to know how much they actually will invest when they come in. So, it kind of says, firstly, people usually spend this much. And secondly, this is how much you probably might want to invest as well. Because some people come in and they don't actually know what the normal amount to invest is. So if you kind of give them that guide, it helps them as well. That is literally what I say to people in terms of the investment when they want more. And people are very happy with that because I've given them a premium option and I've told them what people usually spend as well. And that's basically
left them in control.
Yes, absolutely. Because they can come back and they can say, that's too much out of our budget. And people do say that. And I say, that's fine. Awesome. I'll let you know if you're a winner. So I'm obviously not making it clear that they're not going to be chosen. But yeah, it puts them in control.
Yeah, I love it. I don't think there's anything I can really add to that. I give them a range is the only thing that's different. So genuinely the most popular thing in our studio is framed wall art. And so I give them the price of the smallest one, price of the largest one. The price of the largest, so the largest print is $11.50 in our studio. That's really similar to the price of three really small prints. And genuinely, that's more popular. So I'll go through those and explain that here's the range from top to bottom.
Cool. And
a more popular option is to get a series of smaller prints rather than the one large one. But the choice is totally up to you. There's also other options like albums, etc., etc. But I don't give as much detail about those options because I kind of want to lead people towards the wall. But your answer covers all of that in a much more polished way. So I reckon we can.
Cool.
The votes kept on coming in while you're talking. I think there's a lag, but that's obviously a good sign.
Cool.
All right, so that's the end of the questions, and what we're going to do now is really help you put together a sequence for your own questions. I would like to help you avoid having a phone script or a phone plan. Creative people, script is probably a little bit a unfriendly term. So a plan for your phone calls that doesn't have to include every single one of the phrases or questions that James and I have talked about. That's going to be, book out an afternoon for each phone call. So this is a sequence that I've picked up from a podcast. This one I can give credit for. It's a podcast called The Hustle Inspired. And Russ McCumber is actually one of my neighbors, and it's a sales ninja. So he talks about there being 4 phases of a sales process, starting with rapport building. So that's about getting to know each other. Some of the questions, as we go through this, you'll recognize some of the questions that we've been talking about. So some questions like, for example, tell me a bit about yourselves and your relationship, or who would we be photographing if you guys got selected? Who's in the family? How old are they? What do they love to do together? That kind of thing. A bit of a light chat, and to break the ice. Step 2 in this little process is called discovery, and it's asking more about the person. We're just digging a little deeper. So where James talked before about what are your hopes and dreams for this session with me. I think I phrased that right.
Yeah.
There might also be things like, when was the last time you had a portrait session as a family? Those types of questions that get to what is the real reason why you got involved with this whole project to begin with. Why did you start interacting with a photographer when yesterday you weren't interacting with a photographer? In fact, one of the questions that we talked about before is literally, what do you want to get out of this? We want to dig a little bit deeper than that, and that's where we're asking about where in the house would you hang the prints if it all went really well. Those sorts of things get to what does the person really want, and often they're finding that out on the phone call with you. They've never thought about it, but when you ask the questions, they start thinking about it. We're also trying to work out whether we're a good match, whether we get along, and whether. So the question that James had about, I'm going to massively paraphrase: is your fiance into this? Are they up for this too? That tells us whether they're a good match. If they're marrying somebody who hates photography, then you're probably not going to do very well here. The third step is called the solution phase, and that's about trying to work out and help the customer work out exactly what you can do that will help them get what they really want. So not what they say they want, what they really, really want. So if what they really want is to reconnect as a family, or to capture their kids before they leave the house, to be able to remember this moment in their lives, to remember the post-engagement bubble, we want to help them do that. And in the solution phase, you're asking them questions and saying things that will help them realize that you're the person who can help do what they want. And then the last one is the sale. Now, the cool thing about this, the whole reason why this slide exists is to show you that the bit that a lot of people worry about, this last box here, the sale, it's only hard if you haven't done the other 3. So if you've built rapport and then you've had a really good chat about who the person is, what they really want, and you've identified that you're a good match, and you are confident that you can do what they want, then you explain that to them, explain how awesome this session is going to be, how much fun it's going to be, or how connected they'll feel during it, or whatever it is that highlights the fact that they're going to get what they really want. Then asking at the end, so would you like to book it in? It's the easy bit, right? So hopefully that makes it easier to put your questions into a bit of a sequence that feels natural, and you'll if you go through the replay of this video, or if you've been taking notes, you'll be able to see that we've sort of followed a little bit of that pattern in here as well. Before I move on from that, any questions, if you'd like to fire them through. We're about to get to Q&A anyway, but start throwing them at us, guys. A little bit of homework for you. Obviously optional. We're not going to come around to your houses and check, but here's what I'd suggest that you do with the information that we've given you today. The first one is to write your list of questions. So you might be a dog photographer who doesn't do IPS, for example. Our exact questions aren't going to be right for you, but you'll be able to very easily tweak them until they are. So go through our questions, pick the ones that resonate with you, and rewrite them into your own words. So just make a list of like 6 to 8 things that you'd like to ask or say that from this webinar you'd like to say on your next phone call with a client. Step 2, make sure that you haven't chickened out and that you haven't just picked out all of the questions that aren't about pricing or products, because obviously if you've got anything from this webinar, you will have seen that we both really, really strongly believe that pricing and products need to be talked about in this first phone call. So then jump back to the slide that we just left about rapport. I'm having a total mental blank on the second word. Discovery, solution, and sale, and put your questions, your 6 to 8 questions, put them into a sequence that follows roughly that pattern. Remember that the conversation can meander, and you might not end up doing all of them in the perfect sequence every time. But if you start with your list in that sequence, it's probably going to the conversation will probably naturally follow that sequence anyway. And then pick on a partner, a friend, a fellow photographer, ask them to do some practice calls with you, and return the favor if it's a photographer. In the next slide, I'm going to show you some of the scenarios that are worth practicing. Any homework you'd like to add, James?
No, I think honestly that's really good. Like, I think it is just about really kind of working on what works for you. Putting the questions in a sequence is a really good way to do it. So you just get an understanding of kind of what works for you. Because, not every question is going to be relevant for everybody, certainly depending on kind of what you do and stuff. But honestly, I think kind of having your pricing and products definitely is like in that list is really essential, because it is, again, just being really, really transparent. And mock calls, again, are really good. If you find someone who really, will kind of take the time to do it with you, it's a really good thing. Just to kind of have someone who is going to be a bit more hardball with you and puts you on the spot. Because it's one thing thinking, oh, well, I know I'll say that, and then it comes to it, and you're thinking, it's different. I think when you're actually kind of put on the spot by somebody, it really helps really kind of nail things down as such.
It's probably worth having a photographer and a non-photographer to do this with. I find that
absolutely.
I often use my wife Jo for this kind of thing. She's just a little too nice sometimes, so doesn't want to trip me up. Whereas a photographer will probably deliberately throw in some hard questions because they know that it's ultimately good for you.
Yeah.
So a couple of scenarios to practice. I'm sure there's a million more, but this will start you off. So get someone on a mock call to pretend that they have no money, but they're not allowed to mention it unless you ask them directly. So this is a good way of just forcing yourself to practice asking those money questions or the product questions, to weed it out of them. The next one, get someone to pretend that they're really unenthusiastic about a shoot, that they are could take it or leave it. Could be a bit of fun. Not all that excited. Not all that invested. And the trick with all of this is give someone a list, but don't tell them. Okay, now you do it. Now we're practicing the unenthusiastic call. Just say you're going to pick from this list at random. And so you want to try and practice identifying this stuff on the mock call. The next one, someone is going to pretend to be your perfect client. They're going to give you all the right answers, because you need to not freak out and run around the room doing a happy dance when you hear someone say, "Yeah, that top package sounds great. Oh, I've just renovated my house and we've just got all these blank walls and I just want to fill them. I haven't really thought about budget. I don't really care. I just want to wallpaper the house with photos." You want to be able to keep a straight face and move on to the next question. And then the last one, someone to just ask lots of tricky questions. So this is the questions that I imagine are probably going to come up as in the Q&A. Feel free, throw them at us. Things like, can I get just all the digitals? Why is photography so expensive? The list is never ending. So that's it. Thanks everyone for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you found it useful. If you've got so in a sec, I'm going to put the call out for questions. So feel free to just hit the messenger icon and start sending them through. If you've got other topics that you want to hear about that are kind of around chatbots, but not exactly how to use a chatbot, I was really surprised when I heard that people were having these problems. And it's a silly thing to be surprised about. It's something that I guess I probably assumed that when I struggled with it initially, that was just me, and that everyone else smashed it the first time around. And it was interesting to kind of hear that the things that I've learned over the years, the things that James has learned over the years, are actually really useful to people. If there's things like that, feel free to send a message through, and it could be our next my next webinar topic. If there's more things you want to pick on James pick his brain for, he's more than welcome back as well. So feel free, just let us know if there's other things you want to talk about. For now, first up, I just want to say massive thanks to James for coming on and putting himself through this. And also put the call out to you guys. Fire questions at us. In the Messenger is a better place to do it than the YouTube comments, if that's okay, just because I can't see them on my screen. I'll try and get them up while we talk. So while we wait for Messenger to catch up, is there anything that we've missed, James? Anything you'd like to add?
I can't think so, really. I mean, the big thing is, it's just kind of, it seemed, I think phone calls, I think I said it before, like phone calls are one of those things I think, we as photographers shy away from. And, I mean, we always say it's one thing we always need to get better at. But, if you can, as soon as I started to get better at the phone calls, like everything just flowed. And like, yeah, it really helps. And another big thing I did was I got, I mean, I use Calendly, but having like a scheduling thing is really good. I mean, I'm pretty sure like people use it with the bot anyway, but that helped me out as well. And yeah, just keep practicing, and keep trying to just think about, like Ian said, to be fair, it's really about getting that semantic connection where people start to really understand what the end result is going to be. Like, what is the end result? It's not like, oh, well, free photo. Yep, that's it. It's kind of like, really try and make people understand that, you're a professional photographer, that what they're getting is like the deal of the lifetime. Like, this is awesome. Like, you're getting a complimentary session, you're getting credit towards wall art, and you're getting a fine art print. Like, that isn't something the average Joe gets every day. And you're very busy. You're a very busy person you could be doing weddings and this other stuff. And to give this away is a big thing. And, like, value your time, like really do value your time, because as I say, I worked out the other day that I spend on average 10 hours with clients, because I do like, quarter of an hour phone call. I have them in here for an hour to chat with them, to design the session. I do I go in the forest, so I might have 2 hours driving out somewhere, and now 2 hour photo session and a 2 hour drive back for me, maybe if I'm going to the ends of the earth. And then maybe like an hour editing the photos and an hour in here for the review. It's a lot of time. And in that time, I could write like 2 blog posts, which get me all this SEO juice, or I could, do all these things. And you just got to think, if I'm going to dedicate all these hours to one person, I've got to make sure it's worth my time, because it's all very well, doing, free sessions. If you like doing it, like Ian said, if you like to do that, that's awesome. On your own time, amazing. Like, I like doing those kind of sessions as well for people who I think are really cool. But when it comes to this, when really it is at the end of the day a way to generate income for you so you can feed yourself and your family, you want to just make sure you're really valuing yourself and getting that time locked down. And the way to do that is by just really, really pre-qualifying people and making sure that you are a good fit, and that they're going to rave about you. They're not going to be like, well, I kind of want that, and then we'll just leave. You want people who are going to just, rave about you the whole time and love what you do. And, they're going to end up talking about you. They're going to end up having a way better experience, and they're going to end up with the most awesome photographs from yourself as well. And it's very long-winded explanation.
Good. I couldn't agree more, though.
Yeah.
So I've got a couple of questions in here, and then we'd probably better wrap up. I'm just catching the time. Thanks everyone who's watched the whole thing. We have a lot to share. We're both a bit chatty, so thanks for sticking with us. I'm going to just take a couple of questions that seem like they incorporate other people's questions all in one. So Lisa has asked, how do you let the wrong people down gently? And if this is people who have already booked in, do you ever unbook the wrong client? And how would you work that? So James and I have got, realized I haven't put myself on the screen there. James and I have got different perspectives on this and different processes for this. I just started to interrogate James about this just before the call, and we didn't finish it. So I'm interested too, Lisa. My process is that on the phone call. So the calls that we're talking about, they've booked in a phone call, but they haven't booked in a session. So I've said you've been shortlisted, but I haven't said you've been selected. When we have this phone call, we have a really in-depth, open conversation, and there's a lot of situations where I will basically just talk the person out of it on the phone, and that sounds manipulative. That's not what I mean to say. I'll ask them whether it's a really good idea for them. So, for example, when it's an engagement session promo and somebody has a wedding photographer booked already, or their wedding is only 3 months away, everything else sounds awesome, but they've managed to get through the bot and everything up to this point, and we get on the phone, we find this out, that they've got a wedding photographer, and there's really, when we dig into it a little bit, there's a chance that wedding photographer could do an engagement session for them. Ultimately, for them, that's going to be better practice for their wedding day anyway, and so I will tell them that. I'll say, look, I'm happy to do a session for you, but it's going to be much better for you if you do that with your wedding photographer. I know some people on these calls are a bit more rigid, and those people have $0 sales, and that's fine. That would be awesome. I'm probably a little bit too soft, but so I'll generally kind of just try and talk the person out of it a little bit. There's also people who I will, at the end of the phone call, rather than kind of going to that sale part of the process where we've gone rapport, discovery, solution, sale, we just don't get to sale. We get to solution. We talk about a little bit about what I could do for you, whether that's going to work for you, and then we kind of just wrap it up there. And I say, all right, cool, I'll get back to you. And then I get back to them in Messenger a little bit later and say, look, I'm sorry, I don't think this is as good a match as some of the other people who've come forward. Maybe we could look at it down the track. or here's a free lead magnet. I wouldn't call it a lead magnet. Here's a free PDF or something like that that you can get on our website that'll help you take your own photos better or something. So you asked about families, but hopefully that answer clarifies things. Feel free to ask follow-up questions after the webinar as well if you'd like. James, anything you'd like to add to that one?
Yes, sure. So, I mean, throughout the whole process, I mean, I've got a lot of points where I kind of get an impression of somebody. If at some point I don't get a great feeling, like, I say, does your partner know about it? And they're like, oh, well, not really, I did this as a surprise. I don't think you'd really like it. What I typically do is I try to keep the call going for a bit longer, asking like a question like, what do you guys like to do on a lazy Sunday? Where do you think you'd have an art piece? And what I do is I basically end it by saying, well, I'm doing a final round of interviews at the moment, but what I'll do is I'm going to ring up the winners in the next few days. If you're one of the chosen ones, I'll give you a buzz. Do you have any other questions in the meantime? And that kind of closes off nicely. And I've never, ever had any bad feedback from anything because of that, which is great. So if it's someone I want to let down, I'll do it that way. I did have, I was speaking to Ian just before about this, basically, I did have a lady last night who got through the whole process, the whole phone call with me. And I was like, great, any questions, anything you want to know? And she said, can we get all the images on a USB? And to me, that's like the devil answer that. So what I said is, I mean, I've got a little thing I basically say, whereas I say, absolutely, you can. It's a lot more of a premium option. To be honest, when couples come in, they always fall in love with the art pieces anyway. But, what I say is basically, if you would like to invest in that, you certainly can. It's an investment of X, Y, and Z. Like, let's pick a number out of it. It's an investment of $2,000.
Yep.
So immediately, and I told her that, and she said, oh, okay, yep, that's fine. And I know people say that sometimes. And so what I did is basically I sent her an email, because what happens is if they win, I send them an email saying, well done, you're one of the winners. Please, here's a link to book yourself in for your design session where they come into the studio. But what I did with her is I also said, I know we spoke on the phone about the potential to invest in all the images on USB, and again, I basically repeated what I told her. I said, couples come in and they fall in love with the wall art, so that, most times not, people don't want that usually. The investment is this much. And I literally just reiterate what I told her. So at the end of the day, if she comes in and she wants all the images on a USB, she can have it, because she is one of the winners, and I can't, and at least for me, I kind of don't back down from that. But I'm going to be so completely honest with her. I'm going to say it's going to cost you $2,000 for the 30 to 50 images. It's going to be that.
Yep.
And so at the end of the day, she can book herself in if she wants. She might come back to me. I haven't heard from her yet, but she might come back to me and say, I've had a chat to my partner. It might be a bit too much for us at the moment. In which case, great. Because I'd rather that. I would so rather I just told her what the price was, rather than being like, I'll probably just convince her otherwise. Usually people, I think that's probably the only person this time around who's ever asked that question. And I think they've only one person's asked it this time, because I've had such a good, I've had such kind of a drill on like where your art piece is going to be, what art pieces you like, where can you see in your home. Yeah, and say like
all those seeds throughout the phone call.
Yeah, and so for this woman, I just said I'm just going to tell her the price, and if it gets to that, if you get someone who's really being difficult like that, just tell them the price, and then at the end of the day, if they're scared off, good. If they're not, cool, good.
Yeah, exactly. They go in with they book their session with their eyes wide open if they book it.
Absolutely, yeah, 200%.
So we're just going to do 2 more questions if you've got any more time, James.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I don't have to go anywhere. Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So it's going to be Heath and Richard.
Cool.
Richard, your question came in first, like really early on. I promised I'd get to it. We will get there. But I'm going to do Heath's first because it's faster and easier.
Mm-hmm.
So Heath asked, at what point in the process do they see the price list? So I might take that one first. In fact, actually, I'll take this one. You can take Richard's, and we can butt in on each other if we need to add anything.
Awesome.
For me, they see a full price list at the design appointment, and they see enough information to know whether that price list is going to work for them. right throughout the process. So I don't ever send. This is about to change actually, but at the moment, I don't ever send an entire price list because I think it just freaks people out, and it also sends them into this spiral of, do I want a 18 by, do I want a 20 by 30 or 30 by 40? Do I want a square or a rectangle? Do I want 3 small ones or 2 big ones? All of that stuff, it's just impossible to know until after you see your pictures. And so I just personally don't see the point of sending an entire price list. But what they do get is on the chatbot, they get told this is the starting price of each of our main products. And some of them, they get a range rather than just a starting price. On the phone call, I will answer absolutely anything they like. They get, and they, whether they like it or not, they get the starting prices again of everything. Before the session, I call a couple of days beforehand to chat about weather and clothes and that kind of stuff. And we again talk about products. And then at the session, I hand them a bit of paper that's got FAQs on it, and it's got those same numbers again. So no one can be in any doubt that there's costs associated. No one can be in any doubt about what products are available and not available, and roughly what the prices are. But no one gets the specific this number for exactly this product, because I just don't see the value in it. Are you? What's different about your process, James?
Yeah, I mean, I basically do the same. What I do is I give them a full price list when they come in. But to be honest, I've been thinking about changing it up lately. It seems to be a never-ending kind of debate. It's kind of whether to give them the prices, all the prices, and all that stuff. For them, I do want to move towards not giving them a whole price list. But for the moment, the way I've been doing it is, on the website, they can see everything starts from. So they can see for each specific kind of, if it's a single piece or a collection or a box of prints, it tells them like starting prices, tells them the average investment. When they come in for the design session, like Ian, basically, this is when I basically give them the investment list right at the end. So the whole thing with me, and I think a good principle to have is that, you've got to build value to people, and then you justify, you give them the investment, and by that time, the investment is already justified. So when they see, the price for a 30 by 40 or a box of prints, they say, of course it's that much. James has spent an hour talking with us, designing our appointment. He's done all this for us. Of course it's going to be that much. That makes total sense. And that's what I do basically. But in the lead up to it, if someone really grills me, like this woman last night, I'll say, okay, do you know what? All the images, $2,000. I'm not gonna pussyfoot around. Excuse my French. Whereas, when they come in, I'll give them an exact kind of guide to take home with them. And like Ian says, it's just about having that guide reinforced the whole time. So I'll say, hey, at the end of the shoot, I'll say, hey guys, really, really excited. I know when you came in, you wanted to get that art piece above the couch. I'm gonna have the best images for you guys ever. We're gonna design it all. It's gonna be fantastic. And it's just that constant reinforcement of, you said this, you want that in your home, or you think you want that in your home. You're aware of where the prices are. No shocks, no surprises. So when it comes into the final thing, they know, I know, there's no surprises.
So the phone call kind of goes through those 4 phases: the rapport, discovery, solution, sale. The product sale goes through, I keep on forgetting to move the camera. The product sale goes through the same thing. So your rapport building starts on the phone call. The discovery is happening on that call before the session, or when you're doing a design appointment before the session and at the session. The solution stuff is happening throughout as well a little bit, but it really happens in the IPS session, where you say, I know you guys now. I know what you want, why you did this session, where you want to hang this stuff. Here's the solution that can solve that problem for you, and here's the exact price of exactly that. And I'm here to help you change that to whatever it needs to be. But here's what I would do. And then the sale part becomes really easy. Let's leave that one there, because poor Richard has been waiting very patiently for a long time. I hope you're still with us, Richard. Your last message didn't come very long ago. So the question is, if you've gone through the 4 phases, is there still a need to ask for a refundable booking fee, which goes towards print credit? What's the best way to bring this up?
Yeah.
So, question for you, James. Do you do refundable booking fees for your sessions when it's a free session?
Yes, I do. Now, the reason why I do that is basically there's kind of 2 reasons. The first is, I mean, I ask for, I can't remember, I don't know if when I started off it was $50, but now I do $100. And I was a bit nervous about doing that. And I've asked that so many times. People are more than happy to do a $100 refundable deposit. Now,
how do you bring that up? Oh, sorry. What are you going to say?
Oh no! How do I bring it up? So basically, what I do is what I say if they get through to the end part of the phone call, it's all good. I say, well, do you know what? I'd actually love to make you one of the winners. And they say, oh my god, wow, amazing! And I say, great, okay, we're all happy, awesome. I say, well, what I'll do is I'll tell you about the next steps. I'll send you guys an email which will book you in for the design session. And also, just because I get pretty booked up pretty quickly, I just need to grab a refundable $100 deposit. More than happy to refund that right after your portrait session, or you can use it towards any art pieces as well. How does that sound? And that always works. I've never had anyone say no to that. And the good thing about it is that, firstly, it actually commits people. Yep. Because I think I did that. I had a phase where I didn't do it, and I had so many dropouts, so many. And I basically say, if you cancel within 24 hours notice for whatever reason, or you miss your session, I get to retain that. And it is basically a safeguard. And to be honest, that's never happened. It's a really great way to kind of lock yourself into them committing. And also when it actually comes to their design appointment, they've actually already got $100 more they've already spent. And it's that whole thing of kind of money spent is money forgotten. So
yeah, right.
Kind of actually also helps them invest more, because then they're like, oh, well, we might as well spend all this extra money. And then I'm like, well, you've also got $100 deposit. And they're like, oh, wow, okay, well, it's a funny thing. But yeah, and don't ever be afraid of asking for that, because otherwise you will get people who won't commit, and they will waste your time, because you'll get fully booked and then you'll go out and you'll have someone not turn up and they won't care because they have no collateral in it. So always ask for it.
Yeah, awesome. I think going to jump back on the screen. For our engagement sessions, we don't do the booking fee. What we do instead is we book in a whole lot of their time. So Joe's background is journalism, and she actually interviews all of our couples, and so they need to spend, as a couple, they spend about an hour with us doing that. And sometimes, I won't go into which situations we do and which ones we don't. Sometimes we also do a design appointment as well. So by the time they get to the session, they've just invested so much time in the whole process that if they pull out at that point, then they've actually lost something, which is probably just as valuable as the $100. Yeah. For family portrait sessions, totally see the value in it, and that's what, yeah. That's what cool. I think we could. I'm just going to do a quick check of the questions and see if anything different has come up. But I think we've exhausted the questions and our voices. So let's wrap up there. Thanks so much, James. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who's watched. If you have any follow-up questions, just chuck them in Messenger, and I'm happy to chat there. If you want to talk about chatbots, that's fine, but I'm going to stick to my promise of having no sales pitch. So if you've been hanging on till the end to wait for some special offer, there's not going to be any of that, because I don't want these webinars to get slimy. I'm hoping to do more of these in the future. Yell out if you've got other questions, other topics that you'd like covered. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Thanks again, James. Thanks.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. Bye.